We meet Sister Barnes and Paxton, who are sitting at a bench and discussing random things and passing time. They work for church and find people and baptize them, and they leave from there to find new people. They meet some girls who do a prank on Paxton and run away, and she feels bad and cries about it. They arrive at a house where their next appointment is and tie a lock to their cycles and go in. Barnes cheers Paxton and they go and knock on door, and Barnes checks her phone for her schedule. Paxton is a bit nervous and they see it started to rain, and a man named Reed opens the door. He greets them and Paxton introduces themselves to him, and Barnes offers him a church booklet. Reed sees it's raining and invites them in, and Barnes asks they can come in if only a woman is also present in house. Reed says his wife is inside, and the girls decide to go in, and Reed says his wife is making a pie. He takes their coats and say the walls and ceilings have metal in them and hopes they don't mind this. The girls say okay, and Reed goes inside to get some snacks, and the girls check the house and feel happy. Reed comes with some cold drinks and says his wife is feeling a bit shy and says she will join soon. They start talking, and Paxton says they were born and raised in church and now help and work for them. They feel happy they have found their meaning in life and their God, and Reed feels happy for them. He says he has struggled to find one true religion for himself and has read about many cultures. Reed says he has read about their church also and shows them a book, which makes Paxton happy. Barnes says she can smell the pie, and Reed asks them to guess the flavor, and she says blueberry. Reed says it is correct and asks how did Barnes' father pass away, and she says he was sick and not well. Reed asks if her father before dying tried to communicate with other side, and she says no. He notices a scar on Barnes's hand, and Paxton says when she dies, she wants to come back as butterfly. Suddenly the lights go out, and Reed says it common and says can he ask a awkward question to them. The girls agree, and Reed asks what they think about polygamy since in old times the church recommended it to their members. Barnes says it was done to increase members since they were low in numbers at that time. Paxton agrees it was morally wrong, and Reed says it was done to legalize their affairs and nothing else. He says men only believes what he wants and has filtered down sayings of God and asks what is truth. Paxton says when something feels right to do it is the truth, and Reed agrees, and Barnes says they will need to talk to their church bishop about these points. Reed says he has studied all religions like Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, etc. through various books. He says all claim to be true religion but aren't, and during his research he found one true religion. Barnes asks can they meet his wife, and Reed goes to call her, and Barnes feels they should leave now. Paxton checks the mobile for no new message, and Barnes sees the scented candle on table has blueberry flavor. Reed comes and informs his wife is ready and asks them to come inside, and Barnes lies she has a call. They decide to leave and remember the keys of their cycles are in their coats, which Reed has taken. They decide to walk back and try to open the door, but see it won't open, and Barnes checks the windows. Paxton tries calling the church, but doesn't get any network, and they decide to go in and look for Reed. They see the lights go out and see a timer on wall and try to restart it, but nothing happens, and they go in. They find Reed and say they got a call from church and need to leave, and Reed is disappointed but agrees. They take their coats and see their keys are missing, and Paxton finds a red key in her coat and is confused. Barnes says they need to leave, but the front door isn't opening, and Reed says it won't open also. He tells them the front door is on a timer and he forgot to reset it, and they need to use the back door. The girls ask to unlock the front door, but Reed says it won't open till morning and says it's on a timer. The girls find this unusual, and Reed says he agrees, but this is the only option and says they are lying. He says he told them his house has metal in walls, so it blocks mobile signals, and they don't need to lie. The girls are scared and say they need to leave and asks which door leads to outside since there are two. Reed asks them to choose, and Paxton says they need to go and asks Reed to tell them the correct door. Reed says do they still believe he has a wife who is other room waiting for them and baking pie. Reed says they believed everything because he made them believe it by placing a scented candle. He says same goes for religion, where they believe what they are told and never question it. Barnes asks to use Reed's phone, but he says he doesn't have any and Barnes says they are leaving. She goes towards a door and opens it and is scared and checks the other door also, and Paxton also comes. They see both doors lead to basement and has stairs, and at church we see their supervisor Kennedy. He is working in church and worried for them, and Barnes asks Reed to tell the correct door and leave. Reed says his house is on a hill and they need to go down and exit from behind, and the girls are scared. They say people will come looking for them, and Reed says he can help them with a game. Paxton notices a pointed weapon and Reed takes out Monopoly game and says they must heard of this. Reed takes out another game and says this game came out before Monopoly and had same rules. Monopoly was marketed well and became successful, and the other game owner died without money. Reed says similarly there are 3 religions in world: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and puts their books. He says Judaism was the original religion, Christianity the popular one, and Islam is the newer religion. He says is it similar to Monopoly games and asks for their church book, which came after 800 years. He says all books are iterations of each other and says same thing happens in music world. Paxton types run on her mobile and asks Barnes about it, but she says it's not safe to run now. He says Judaism is followed only by 0.2% of population, even though being the original religion. Because there is no adverting it is not popular, unlike their church, which sends out girls like them to convert other people. He says he has a thought which he wants to ask them and starts a projector, and Kennedy goes out. He starts looking for the girls, and Reed says all different religions have made stories about their God. He says all these stories are untrue and only made up by people, and shows them all religions have their own savior and God. He says in 1,000 years people will believe any story they start now, and says the thought is scary. He writes belief and disbelief on 2 doors and asks them to choose whether they believe in God or not. He asks them to choose based on their faith and says all religions are fake like their church. He throws the book and Barnes picks it up and notices the weapon and asks Reed what will happen. He says he doesn't know until they choose, and Paxton quickly decides to choose the disbelief door. Barnes decides to go for belief door and says Reed is testing them and playing a game with them. He is studying them and says she also doesn't know what all religions in the world mean and say. She tells Paxton to believe in her God and choose the belief door, and they open the door and go inside. Reed sits there quietly observing, and they go down, and Reed closes the door and they quietly go down. They find a door and open it and see they are in basement with a table and no way out and are scared. Paxton cries and asks if they are kidnapped, and Barnes says Kennedy will come to look for them. Barnes tries to reach a high window by climbing the table but breaks a wood and unable to reach. They hear Reed coming, and Barnes gives Paxton weapon and asks to stab him when she says magic underwear as code word. She hides it, and they see a woman come in with a pie and sit down to pray, and they see a speaker. Reed is above working on his house model, and they hear some music playing and see the woman praying. Barnes goes up and tries to open the door and sees a matchbox near one door, and Reed talks to them. He says the woman is a prophet of God, and tonight they will witness a miracle, and they see the woman. She gets up and starts eating the pie, and Reed says the pie has poison. She will soon die and be resurrected. The woman eats and dies, and Reed makes a note in his book and asks them to check her pulse and be sure. They check and confirm he has no pulse and is dead, and suddenly hear the doorbell ring and feel happy. They run to see if Kennedy has come and decide to scream, but Reed closes their door before going. He resets the lock and opens the door and meets Kennedy, who asks if he has seen any girls come here. They girls scream, but no one hears them, and Reed lies and says no one has visited him since morning. They decide to pull the rug to get matchbox, which they will use to start fire, and someone will notice it. They start pulling the rug and Kennedy leaves and Reed comes back in room and hears the doorbell again. The girls take the matchbox and Paxton sees and feels the woman has moved, but Barnes says she is dead. Kennedy offers the church book to Reed and the girls try to light fire, but are unable to do so. Kennedy leaves and Paxton notices the woman is not on chair, but behind her, and they get scared. The woman pukes blood and says something gibberish and says it is not real, and Reed comes down. He takes her away saying she need rest and leaves her a room and comes back down to the girls. He says one of the girls has been lying and asks them what they saw and describe their experience. He takes a book and Paxton says the woman said she saw an angel and a conductor and talked about her other side experience post-death. Reed is happy to hear this and says he can show them God if they are okay to die and it will be temporary. They will be resurrected and get their answer of what is their purpose, which no religion can give. Barnes says Reed wants them to believe dying is their own die and kill them, and says it wasn't a miracle. It was a magic trick, and says in her childhood she was very sick and had a near-death experience. She also remembers seeing something similar to Prophet, which is caused due to lack of oxygen. Reed says this is not a trick or near-death experience, as she checked the pulse and confirmed her death. Barnes says the magic word, and Paxton readies her weapon, but Reed cuts Barnes' throat, and she bleeds. Paxton gets scared and runs above and cries for help, and Barnes falls down, and Reed says she'll be okay. Reed checks and sees Barnes is still breathing, and Paxton comes down, and Reed takes a cutter. She cuts the scar on her hand and removes an implant, and says Barnes isn't real, but a program. She won't be resurrected due to this, and Paxton asks him to explain what he means, and he is happy. Reed says they all live in a simulation, and hence the Prophet said it's not real, and Barnes isn't a person. He explains her with a drawing, and says all real people can die and be resurrected, and she can be too. Paxton says the implant is a contraceptive used for birth control, and says simulation theory is not real. Reed says he cannot prove it like other religions and asks if she believes in the miracle she just saw. Paxton says she believed at first and feels Reed is improvising because his plan didn't go as planned. Reed laughs and asks to explain, and Paxton says he switched the bodies of Prophet when the bell rang. Their attention went to sound, and she noticed the body had moved when she came back down. Reed replaced the woman with a new woman, and she read a script given to her, but said it is not real. She meant to say the miracle isn't real, and says Reed is trying to improvise to correct her fault. Reed asks if it is true, where is the second way in basement, and checks the walls, and Paxton sees the table. She moves it and sees water going down, and remove the mud, and finds a door, and sees it has a ladder. Reed says if she is correct there must be another body down, and asks her if she wants to go down. Paxton says she needs to go down to find the truth, and Reed says she will find one true religion also. She climbs down and sees a body, and Reed closes the door, and she walks ahead and opens a door. She sees many things lying and continues walking and opening more doors and finds a locked door. She removes the red key from her pocket and opens the door and goes in and see many cages here. There are many women here who are similar to Prophet and are locked here and look very weak. She gives her coat to one, and Reed comes and asks what is the one true religion and what she found. She says when they were waiting for him, Reed went outside and stole their bikes and hid them. She noticed his hair was wet when he came back and returned the key to wrong pocket. She told one of the women to use the cycle lock on last door and wanted Paxton to visit this room. Reed asks why he wanted her to visit here, and Paxton says the one true religion is control. He wanted Paxton to feel he could control and manipulate her, and Reed laughs and agrees to this. He says control is true religion and says he didn't force the woman to eat the poison pie, she chooses it. He cuts the finger of one woman and says he does this because they let him control them. He says like the church tells to follow one religion and behave in a certain way, he also does same. Paxton cries and Reed tries to calm her down, but Paxton uses the weapon and stabs him in the throat. She runs and climbs the stairs and Reed removes the weapon and Paxton comes out and blocks the door. She goes down to check on Barnes and Reed stabs her in the stomach with cutter and she falls down. Reed is also badly injured and asks Paxton to pray, and she does, and he crawls towards her to kill her. He takes his cutter and puts it on her throat, but is suddenly hit by Barnes with the wood stick with nails. Paxton is shocked to see Barnes alive, who falls down and dies, and Reed is also dead, and Paxton cries. She says goodbye to her, and Paxton opens the window to escape from there and runs from there. She calls for help and sees a butterfly land on her hand and thinks it is Barnes, and it flies away.